everybody. Welcome in. Let's go. It's another episode of the Wobcast 2.0. Excited to be joining you talking Minnesota Vikings football after an unexcitable performance by the Minnesota Vikings, but we have a lot to get to. We're gonna talk at a macro level. We're gonna talk at a micro level. We're gonna talk about the Carolina Panthers, what's ahead for the Vikings. We got a lot to get to today. I know you all are bummed out about the game yesterday as the Vikings dropped their third consecutive contest to start the season, but when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right? And I got a tough one joining me to break it all down, and that's my co-host and my partner, Gyles, who did his best yesterday at US Bank Stadium to will the Vikings to a victory late in the game, but he couldn't quite do it. And if Gyles can't do it, it can't be done. So let's figure out what the heck went wrong for the Vikings yesterday against the Chargers. Hey, Gyles, how's it going, man?
Hey, happy Monday. It is truly the best day of the week, like I always say. A little bit tougher today, more than usual because of the loss yesterday. I was there right in the end zone, got to watch all the plays. It was definitely an exciting game to watch, I will say. As a general fan of football, that was a really fun game to be a part of. Now, obviously, we did not come out on top, and we'll talk through all the reasons why that maybe happened and what we can do to maybe try to improve that. But definitely fun to watch. Somber morning here with an 0-3 record, but hey, we'll talk through what should we do this season.
Yep. It is a somber morning. You're right, Gyles. From a relative standpoint, it's a somber morning for football fans in Minnesota, for Vikings fans. And to the extent that my wife can be a true barometer of how Vikings Nation is feeling, and she is, diehard and season ticket owner and the whole thing. And she was there yesterday. I was not. The Lakeville Cup Fall Soccer Tournament was happening, so we divided and conquered. I conquered my side of the deal. The boys won the Fall Cup, so we were good on our side of things. I got to tell you, Gyles, she came home. She was downtrodden, man. I mean, She can shake off losses. This one hurt, and it's like this one in a vacuum you could handle, but this one after starting 0-2, I think this is hurting the Vikings faithful.
Yep. I could not agree more. And I think that is kind of an important element to mention, is viewed in a vacuum, because if you look at each quarter, for example, for all the games that we've played thus far, all three games, you look at all 12 quarters, you would find a lot of things to like, right? Where you're like, all right, well, we messed up a little bit here, but wow, I really like this. And then when you zoom back out and you just look at three holistic games, you're like, oh my goodness, we're 0-3. Should we light this on fire? So I think it's important to understand context when it comes to the Vikings this year. Now, that's not necessarily meant to say like that should dictate the route that we move forward here this season. But I think it's important to note we aren't as bad as most 0-3 teams. Like, there are a lot of great things to like. Now, the question is, can you recover from an 0-3 record?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Because I think that is, we're going to talk about the Chargers game. You and I have a lot of points to get to, but you bring up the question, Gyles, that we should talk about. Can the Vikings recover from this? So let's talk about where are the Vikings right now, and where should they go from here? I think folks want to hear that discussion more than they want to hear about why Keenan Allen had 18 catches on 20 targets or what Kirk Cousins should have done in the last 25 seconds. We'll get to that. First, bigger picture. I mean, literally, currently, the Vikings are at TCO Performance Center getting ready for Carolina. That's literally where they are. Now, Carolina is also 0-3, following losses to begin the season at Atlanta, at home to the Saints, and then this weekend they were in Seattle. So they lost all three of those games. So Vikings are getting ready for them right now. From a narrative standpoint, the Vikings are in a significant hole at 0-3 with a winnable game coming up against Carolina, but games against Kansas City and San Francisco on the horizon within a month here. So as the early season picture goes, this is fairly ominous for the Vikings. Optimistically, they're on the bottom looking up at a weak division, I believe. Relatively speaking, a weak division in the NFL and in the NFC, a weak division. No team has demonstrated, even the Lions. I know they beat Kansas City in week 1, but the Lions have not demonstrated or shown us that they're running away with this thing. They're 2-1. I think they've got flaws of their own that they have to deal with. I don't think Green Bay is going to run away with it either, even though the Vikings are looking up at them right now. And I'll also say that despite Kansas City and San Francisco coming up, They do have a string of games against Green Bay, Atlanta, New Orleans, Denver, Chicago, and Las Vegas after October 23rd. Now, you can make some hay with that. Mm-hmm. So that's the optimistic viewpoint. Negatively, they're staring at 3-6 right in the face, man. I mean, I think they'll win in Carolina, but I don't know that they'll beat Kansas City or San Francisco. So even if they beat Carolina and Chicago here in the next month, I think they're looking at 3-6. They really don't have a genuine threat on the ground. I know that they did some good things on the ground this week, and we'll see what happens with Cam Akers, but it's the Kirk Cousins show on offense. The defense is worse, or I don't know. Is it worse than it was last year? No, it's not. But the defense is not what people hoped it would be in terms of an improvement. So that's the negative side of this. So without giving away your answer, Gyles, to the question of where should the Vikings go from here, because we'll talk about that next. Where are the Vikings right now? Your response or your own thoughts after I sort of laid it out that way.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we'll start with offense because that's kind of where the NFL's going. And I think a lot of people look at this last game and they get very frustrated. So, for example, Justin Jefferson was targetless throughout the entire first quarter. And they say, what happened? And they get up in arms about the play calling and Kirk Cousins and a lot of different facets. At the end of the day, he still ended the game at 149 yards, which, ironically, I think he would have been the first player, I think in NFL history, if I'm not mistaken, to go the first 3 games with over $150. So he unfortunately did not shatter that record. But $150 is nothing to shake a hat at. That is a very strong game. Now, he obviously had a weak quarter, but there's a lot of things to like, a lot of things that maybe could use improvement. But I think when you get down to the X's and O's, you get down into the actual nitty gritty of the game, we're not doing too bad. When you look at yards per play in the entire NFL throughout 3 games, or the first 3 games, limited sample size, where would you guess that the Vikings are ranking-wise in yards per play? Offensively.
I would say, man, they've had some good yardage totals here. They've also run a lot of plays. Probably 3rd. 4th?
We are second in yards per play offensively. That is great, right? Now, obviously, we've had some time of possession issues, at least in the first 2 games, not necessarily against the Chargers. We actually had more time of possession than the Chargers, but that is something that should not be underscored enough, because your ability to move the ball and actually put yards on the field is, I was going to say second to none, but we're literally second. So we're doing great, right? And when I think about yards per game, we're 3rd in yards per game. We're pushing the ball down the field. We are actually 7th in first downs per play percentage. So on the first downs per play, we're 7th. And it's a pretty tiny margin between us and number 1. So we're able to move the ball down the field, right? So when you think about us against the Chargers, for example, which we'll get into in a little bit, the Chargers are a great team. I think sometimes when you view the Minnesota Vikings in its totality throughout the entire 2023 season, you use it against the lens of the Chargers. The Chargers are a great team, and we were able to do some pretty great things offensively. Now, when we're thinking about the holistic thing, I think we're doing great offensively. Our biggest issue on offense is turnovers. It's still a big issue. We're fumble fingers. We're butterfingers, and it's causing issues. So when I think about the Minnesota Vikings, I think there's a lot of things to like. I think we can move the ball. I think, we'll talk about it a little bit. I think we've been able to reestablish our run game. It was not great through the first 2 weeks. The 3rd game against the Chargers, we did much, much better. Obviously, we've traded for Cam Akers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We beefed up our offensive line in Dalton Risner. Although he's not necessarily a great run blocker, I think there will still be a slight improvement if we do trade him out for Ed Ingram. So all that to say, I think we're one of the best passing offenses in the league. We're going to be significantly improved in the run game based on our addition. So I'm really excited about offense. You agree?
I agree with almost all of that. I don't think they're a credible threat on the ground. I know it was their best performance to date running the ball.
Yep.
But I think that I don't think Kevin O'Connell and Wes Chandler can help themselves with Cousins, Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and not great run blocking. I just think they might be smart. I can't see them doing it. Like, I'm trying to think of other people who I've felt this way about, where it's like they just can't help themselves. They just got to throw it, So, but aside from that, I agree with everything you said. Turnovers are a problem. The one thing I would add, that if that I find annoying as someone who likes it done the right way. I think Cousins takes sacks he shouldn't be taking.
I would agree with that.
So I would add that to it. But they're a very good offensive team, Gyles. I agree with you on that. Like, it's formidable. They move the ball down the field. They pick up chunks of yardage. There are game management and crucial moments in games where they don't execute great on offense or defense. But the body of work offensively, their total talent level on offense, especially at skill positions, is A+.
Yep. I'm glad you said that. It kind of sparked a thought I had when I was at the game while we were there.
What's that?
And I know I just mentioned that the run game improved. We actually achieved 5.4 yards per carry, yards per rush attempt against the Chargers, which is much better than we were before. We were about half that in the first 2 games. However, if you were to evaluate the Minnesota Vikings going into that game, if you're the Chargers, what's their biggest weakness? In my opinion, it's turnovers. So I think you can make an argument based on your comment there that they allowed 5.4 yards per carry because they were not trying to tackle. They were trying to strip the ball.
Oh, man.
Is there a chance that we got artificially inflated because they were not trying to tackle? Like, the biggest way to change the game is to try to strip the ball, right? And we were obviously trying to establish the run game. We had significantly more carries than the Chargers. Is there a chance that, like, they were playing chess and we were playing checkers?
Yes, there is a chance of that, and I don't think it's like, don't worry about tackling him, just let him run. It's not that, but it's, hey, your second man there, third man there, start raking at it. At it, right? Yeah, for sure. And
you're going to give up a couple more yards per play, but if you get a couple turnovers, it wins the game.
And it really happened twice. It happened to Madison, too. He fumbled that,
and he got lucky that got called back.
He did. The Vikings got lucky there, but that was a fumble, man. And it happened to Hawkinson on the Vikings' first possession, I believe it was. So, yeah, there is a chance there. But let's move on to defense, though, Gyles, because I agree with you on offense. That is not where the problem is. Turnovers are a problem. Too many sacks are a problem. Whatever. But, like, when you look back at this, you're not going to totally let the offense off scot-free here. You win and lose as a team, so the offense would say we could do more, but I don't really think there's much to have a big problem with on offense.
I would definitely agree. And I think when you look at the stats, I'm just pulling up the yards per play defensively. That's where, if you had to guess, where are we in the NFL in 2023? And yards per play allowed.
I would say it's the inverse of the offense. It's probably, bottom 5.
Yep, we're 25th. We allow 5.5 yards. And ironically, that is across the entire first two. The first 3 games of the season. We're bottom 5.5. And against the Chargers, we were 7.4 yards per play allowed.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I really get into a wrestle in my head because that's bad. Like, that's real bad. But at the same time, you're playing one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, for example, now call me this if this is naive, but if I'm going into that game, I'm thinking, yep, I'm playing the best guy ever. We're going to give up a lot of yards. We're going to give up a lot of yards per play. We need to simply outscore them, right? So I don't know how much there is cause for alarm or panic, like, oh my gosh, we gave up 7 yards per carry. It was against one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's a top 3 quarterback.
You're right, Gyles. I think when you go up against something like that, unless you're an elite defense, the Zim defense in his prime here, the Jets this year, someone like that. Unless you're them, you're probably not them. So when you go up against Mahomes, Herbert, Burrow, when he's playing really well, I think what you say is, of course, like, we're going to execute and try and do the job the right way every time, all that. But it's like, we're going to take punches here for sure.
Yep.
What we have to do is square our jaw back every single time and get ready, because this is football. The ball's going to bounce a weird way. And when that happens, we have to make that play.
Yep.
Right? So
100%.
You have to not get discouraged that Keenan Allen is torching you. You got to keep showing up every single rep to try and win that rep, because that rep that you do win might be a really important one. And an example of the Chargers doing that, I'll give you 2 examples of the Chargers doing that yesterday. The 4th and goal touchdown at the end of the first half. That tight end made a play, man. Like, that was an unlikely completion because of how close Herbert was to the receiver and how hard he threw it. It was unlikely that guy was going to catch it, but he did. Yep. And then the Mike Williams catch when the Chargers were backed up and Herbert threw it down the sideline to Mike Williams before he got hurt, and he had to get his arms underneath it, and it was reviewed and upheld. He made a play, man. That was a crucial moment, and he just made the play. So, they did go up against a really good player. They gave up a lot of yards, but in a key, crucial, clutch moment, they didn't make a play and win a rep.
Yep. I think that's definitely important to note. And I think if we go into Carolina and we suffer, under obviously number 1 overall pick, he has a great future in the NFL, but he's still a rookie. He's only 3 games into the NFL, into professional sports. Yeah. We should be able to hold these guys. I know we're playing a revenge game against Adam Thielen. That will be a talking track, and that'll be some emotion on and off the field. But if we cannot put a decent level stop, I think that's when we need to say, all right, what are we going to do here? Because seeing it up close and personal in US Bank Stadium, we did not get home at all against the Chargers, but we were getting pressure on every single play, right? So obviously, when you look at the Brian Flores defense, they're going to rush and blitz half the time, right? Half the time they are sending a lot of people, maybe everybody, going cover 0, right? And that beats and covers a lot of things. But if you were going up against a quarterback that gets the ball out quickly, that's the cheat code against Brian Flores. Now, in my opinion, correct me if you disagree, when I look at NFL offenses, not all teams can do that well consistently. Doing it well and often is a really hard thing to do, getting the ball out quickly. And just so happens Herbert is really great at that, and we got torched. Now, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about the defense, but I think there's an offense and defense level balancing act that I think we need to talk about here when it comes to how do we solve winning games. Part of it's defense and part of it's offense, but what do we need to do in order to get W's on the board and actually have a successful season, if that is the way to go here?
Well, let's talk about that. Is that the way to go? Where should the Vikings go from here? There's 2 choices. It's eyes on the NFC North title, eyes on the prize, or is it tank for 2024? Let's start with keeping your eyes on the prize and not giving up on the season. You're 0-3, certainly. The first step in that would be, beating Carolina to go to get to 1-3. Detroit looks like, to me, so here's the case for staying the course, trying to get better and right the ship. Here's the case for it. I think Detroit, to me, they look like a 9-win team after 14 games. I think it could be 8, but let's be conservative here for the Vikings and give them 9. So I think they're going to be 9-5 after 14 games. At that point, Gyles, the Vikings would need 7 wins at that same time to have a shot at the division because they play Detroit twice in the final 3 weeks. Yep. So this is how you could get to 7 wins, I think. Carolina, you play Chicago twice.
Yep.
Denver, you have Green Bay at home. And then you'd need to go 2-2 or better in this stretch. Atlanta, New Orleans, Las Vegas, Cincinnati. So can you get 2 games from Atlanta, New Orleans, Vegas, and Cincy? Can you get Green Bay at home? Can you beat Denver at home? Can you beat Chicago twice? Can you win this week in Carolina? If you do that, you're at 7. So now you are within striking distance of Detroit with 3 weeks to go. So you have a chance to have a chance. If that's the way you go, you got to get Reisner in. You got to get Davenport healthy, and he's got to be in. And then philosophically, what you have to do is I think you have to become a pressure team, Gyles, because to me, they don't do a good enough job covering, and they don't do a good enough job of closing on the quarterback. So I would say let's become a pressure team. Let's pressure and blitz a lot because that's going to make them throw the ball quickly, and it's going to require our corners to cover for a smaller amount of time.
Yep, I completely agree. And I think a lot of this discussion is built upon this next game. If you lose against the Panthers, I think that entirely changes this paradigm. But if you are viewing our team in a vacuum today after 3 losses, I do think there is a chance to turn it around based on your explanation. I do think there is a way where you could beat Detroit. And I think this team is good in all the right places offensively. I think you obviously need to adjust for fumbles, right? And if you can get Marcus Davenport back, I do expect us to get a lot more pressure, because watching the team on Sunday, they got home. They almost got home a lot, right? And then the ball got out and they were screwed, right? So if you can get Marcus Davenport in there, all due respect to DJ Wanham, I think that changed the paradigm quite a bit, because I think we're doing very well safety-wise in coverage, but our cornerbacks are struggling because of our pressure issue. So if you can fix the pressure issue with Marcus Davenport, I do believe that that's a solve. Call me naive and call me a homer, but I really believe that is part of this formula, and that's been the missing piece, and that ironically is because he has been out for 3 games. Now, I know injury has been an issue throughout his past, but if you can get him back, I think you can correct the issues on defense. I really, really do. Will we be top 10? No. But as long as you can be league average, I think we'll be fine. I think it's important to note here, the Chargers are top 3 in pretty much every statistical category offensively. They're doing great. Ironic. They're doing very well at moving the ball down the field. I mean, Herbert had a NFL historical game against us, right?
Yes.
And if you compare that idea with the fact that we only lost by 4 points, all of a sudden it's not as bad, right? You would have thought that we would have gotten blown out. It was like the first half of the Colts game last year. We were still within 4 points. We were able to toe to toe. And I think when you think about today's modern NFL, although I do think the defense is an issue and we need to improve upon that, because we cannot get pressure, and we need to if we want to continue being competitive in games. But if that does happen, that's a big if, but it's an if.
Yeah.
I think we can go toe-to-toe and score just like the rest of them. I think when you look at the totality of the Chargers game, I think we potentially tried to establish the run a little bit too much, where going into that game, knowing that you're going against Herbert, I think we thought, well, let's try to control the game. Let's try to run the ball. Let's slow it down. Let's have good time of possession. And I think, unfortunately, we should have approached this game like it was a track meet and try to outscore them. And I think we figured that out too late. Now, I think there was even a chance that we still could have won if we didn't make any mistakes. But imagine if we just tried to not pound the rock, but throw the ball down the field. I think that would have been a much different game. Now, I think it would have been a track meet. Don't get me wrong. That would have been a back and forth, really fun game to watch as a football fan. But I think that would have been the much better route here, because you could not stop the Chargers offensively, nor have a lot of teams been able to. They've been able to put up a lot of yards and a lot of points. I mean, even through the first 2 weeks, a lot of people weren't talking about this, but the Chargers were the only team in NFL history to score more than 50 points through the first 2 games, have 0 turnovers, and go 0-2. That's unlucky at that point. If you're scoring that many points, having 0 turnovers, they're a team that can move the ball down the field. They have a great quarterback, great wide receiver. So I think there is a point to say, let's ease up a little bit on the defense, not to completely let them off the hook, but I think there's a chance that we get better after moving on from this game. And if we can adjust a few things on offense, we just simply need to score more points. And I think that is partially a philosophy thing, in the fact that I think we need to look at our talent, and that's not running the ball. Unfortunately, you need to be able to throw the ball down the field, at least when it comes to the Chargers. Yep. And I think you might have a different outcome.
All right. So that's the case for eyes on the prize, turn this thing around and see if you can bounce back.
Yeah.
Now let's go the other route and talk about that. Tank for 2024. That's the other option. The case for that is you are behind 2 teams already in the division, and it looks like they're both better than you. Detroit has more grit and a better, as good of an offense and a better defense. Green Bay, I think, has a better defense, and we'll see what happens with their offense, but they're a game better than you already. And if you don't win the division, there's really probably realistically only one wild card spot that you're fighting for. It'd be the 7th seed, because Philly or Dallas is going to win the division, and the other one will get a wild card. And I think that Seattle will have a wild card. Throw in the Rams, Giants, Atlanta, New Orleans. There's just a lot of competition for 1 or 2 wild card spots. So tank for 2024, and if you do that, there are trade possibilities here with Cousins and Danielle Hunter, and then you got to make some lineup changes. I think you give fewer snaps to Hicks, and Phillips, Lowry, and Bullard, and you give more snaps to younger guys who you want to develop. So that's the tank for 24 route. We already went through the eyes on the prize route. Your reaction to the tank for 2024, and then let's talk about which one we would choose if we were the boss.
If we lose against the Panthers, I am in much more support of this theory, because of two things. One, it's impossible to get out of 0-4, I think. If you go 0-4, that's a hole that I don't think any team can get out of. Even if you're a great team, which I think we are at least a good team, where we have a lot of things to like. But if you go 0-4, that's a really hard hole to get out of. And more importantly, Kirk Cousins isn't under contract next year. So I think it's important to balance both the now and tomorrow, today and tomorrow. And if he's not under contract next year and you don't think you can win in any meaningful way, you might as well trade him. Not necessarily saying you're actively trying to tank, but like go get some value for him. If he walks, you get zero value from that. Go trade him for a first round pick to the Jets and then prepare for next year, right? Because if he was under contract beyond next year, I maybe have a different approach, but he's not under contract. And if you go 0-4, I don't expect that's a hole you can ever get out of. Even if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, that's a hard hole to get out of. And we have the Niners, the Cowboys. There's some really good teams to like in the NFC, albeit weak in comparison to the AFC. I just think that's too big of a hole.
I mean, if I agree with you, and if you're in that position, even if you get a second or a third round pick for him, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, if you are declaring yourself dead, winning does not help you. I get the culture building and whatever. That's playing hard. You want to play hard every week. That's an in the weeds thing. From a high level, macro level, winning is not helping you. Once you're out, winning is not helping you. So
not at all.
I think, to just cut to the chase here on this discussion, you and I both would still be trying to turn it around and win the division. That's what I would do. If I was the owner of the Vikings or the GM of the Vikings, I would not be turning us off course here. If we were in the NFC East, maybe I would do that, because the Eagles and Cowboys are clearly better than the Vikings. You are not going to overtake them after starting 0-3, but I don't feel that way about the Lions or the Packers. Yep. I think the Vikings will beat the Bears twice.
Yep.
And I think they can get to 7 wins by week 14. I do.
Okay.
And maybe I'm crazy and people laugh at it, but I think, and if you are at 7 wins by week 14, you can catch the Lions if you beat them twice. So that's where I think they should go. I think they got to make 2 really key changes though, Gyles, and we already talked about it a little bit. I think they just have to become a blitz happy, pressure oriented defense because after what I saw yesterday, I can't call that an abomination. I think that's kind of who they are coverage wise.
Yep.
Agreed. They can't cover.
Yep.
They can't cover.
At least in the time that it takes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so even if it's forcing the quick game and you got to rally and tackle, like it's not going to result in a bunch of sacks. It's at least going to result in not having to cover receivers 12 and 15 yards down the field. I think they got to become a pressure-oriented defense, and I'm sure Brian Flores would love to do that. So I would let him turn it on and just tell him to keep going.
So in that train of thought, if you do think that this is a salvageable season, right, which is a realistic route with 0-3. 0-4, it becomes a little different, but I think you are correct in the fact that we are the weakest division in football, period, full stop. Do you try to go trade for an edge rusher? Do you put Marcus Davenport on IR if you feel like, hey, it's going to be 3-4 weeks before we can get back into the fold? Put him on IR and go trade for somebody. And even if it's for a 1-year rental, which I get is a big cost. I mean, you restructured Brian O'Neill. You have about $10 million in cap space. I'm sure there's additional things that you could go do. Assuming that Kirk Cousins is maybe in his last year of suiting up in purple. If you think this is your win now window, which the Vikings have indicated that they kind of are with the signing of Dalton Reisner, trading of Cam Akers, do you trade for an edge rusher to try to fix that?
I mean, I guess you would look at that, but I don't know who that would be.
It's a good question.
I don't think so. I think no, because you're declaring this a win now window still, but you're going to have to give up what is likely a pretty key building block for the post Kirk Cousins era to do that. And I wouldn't do that.
That's fair. I would agree with that. I think, like you mentioned, you have to agree with both today and tomorrow. I was just trying to think about ways to overcome this space, but yeah,
I know, but I'd rather try a different tactic to get to that outcome, which is to let Flores turn it loose and become a pressure-oriented team. And look, you're talking about. I mean, we talked about this. I was like, why are you letting Zadarius Smith go? Like, how are you going to rush the passer, right?
And he's doing great this year.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a top 5 edge rusher right now.
Oh, he didn't want to be here. Oh, he's hurt a lot. He's going to want to be here if you give him the money he wants.
Correct.
And you know who else has hurt a lot? Marcus Davenport.
Yep.
Right. He's hurt a lot too.
Yep. Yeah. And it was clear that Zadarius Smith was a much more of a higher commodity than Marcus Davenport. Now, I'm still high on what Marcus Davenport can be if he's on the field, but he needs to be on the field, unfortunately. I'm sure he's a great guy, but at the end of the day, he's literally costing us wins at this point by being on the roster and not being on the field.
I don't disagree with you that pressure, like getting pressure on the quarterback, is what they have to do. I just wouldn't go the route of trading a 2024 pick to get that edge rusher. I guess I wouldn't do that unless there was a deal. I thought that was a great deal. Maybe it's we know we're not going to extend Hunter. Like, we know we're going to move on from Hunter this offseason. So we're going to bring this guy in for a 3rd or a 2nd round pick, and then we're going to extend him next offseason. And he's going to be part of the build. He is a building block for us. So I don't know what the market would be for that right now. But
would you ever go inside and try to beef up your interior to try to get more interior push? Like go signing Akeem Hicks or someone like that to say, we need more pressure on the quarterback. If we can't do it via trade in an edge rusher, let's find a free agent that is maybe a little bit on the older side, but maybe could give us a little bit of an upgrade when trying to get up the middle.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think a side benefit of that would be if you can get someone who can absorb 2 blockers like Akeem Hicks can do when he's healthy and good, when you're pressuring and stunting and twisting and zone dogging and all of these things, a guy who can consume 2 blockers opens up lanes and opportunities for those tactics to work. So I would love that. That'd be great. And I don't love what they have in the middle. I think Harrison Phillips is a great guy and a great locker room guy, but I don't love what I'm seeing.
Agreed.
I think Bullard is just a guy. And, Tonga's not really becoming what a lot of folks projected or hoped, in my view, from what I can see. So
I agree. I think he had a much better season last season. I think the grades will prove it out once they're released today. But I did see some decent flashes from Jaquelin Roy, our 5th round pick from LSU. So hopefully he can step into more of a primary role. But at the end of the day, you need to change something on that line to be able to get more push.
Yep, I agree. So let's get into the Chargers game here a little bit. Number 1 to me was, I did see every snap of the game. So, there's a lot of things that you want to correct. And if this happened, then the outcome might have been different. But to me, the Bucs, with 30 seconds to go, the Vikings completely mismanaged the game. 41 seconds on the clock, 4th down, completion to Hawkinson for 9 yards. You get a 1st down. That was with 41 seconds left. The next snap did not happen until 12 seconds left in the game.
Yep. That's ludicrous. I know you had no timeouts, but that's still unacceptable. I'd heard that the microphone went out on the helmet, apparently, for Kirk Cousins, so they couldn't communicate with Kevin O'Connell. But still, I assume that teams plan for that contingency. Yes, they do, Gyles, but also, like, he's played for more than a decade in the NFL. Stop the clock. The clock's running down. Yeah. Well, we didn't have any timeouts at that point, but
I know, but I think you got to spike it there.
Oh, yes, correct. I agree. Agreed. Completely agree.
I mean, you have to get everyone up there and spike it. And I don't know if there was a sense of like, coach didn't tell me to spike it. He's going to get mad at me if I waste it down here. But it's like, dude, there's only 20 seconds left. How many more downs can you even have?
Correct.
So I think, I don't know if he really admitted this or said this, but I guarantee you if Cousins could go back and do it again, that's what he would do. He would run up and spike the ball.
Yep, 100%. And that's what would have been required. I think change that one play, or the existence of the play, if you generate that, I think there's a chance we win the game.
Yeah, there is. Let's say, you snap it at 41, Hawkinson catches it at 37, he gets tackled, it's 34, you call a timeout, there's 31 seconds left instead of 12.
Full stop.
And you get a timeout, or you get a clock stoppage, and you think about the play. and maybe you call a different play or whatever, because the next snap was the pick.
Yeah.
So that was terrible. Game management at the end was awful. I liked the Chargers going for it on fourth down where they did, because that was a game-winning play. They were trying to end the game right there. I think that was the right move. They just called a terrible play. I'm like, you haven't been running it up the middle all game. Why on the most important play of the game are you doing a fullback dive?
Yeah,
like,
you
what?
should have done a quarterback sneak. Yeah.
Yes, give the ball to Herbert. Jeez. All right, key moment in the game, Gyles. Game is tied 7-7. Vikings have the ball late second quarter. It's 1st and goal. Ball on the 3-yard line. Madison, 2-yard loss on the fumble, non-fumble.
Yep.
Incompletion to KJ. Incompletion to Madison. Kick a field goal.
Yep.
Yuck. To make it worse, the Chargers get the ball, turn around, and drive down for a touchdown. And their touchdown came on 4th and goal. And to me, I look back on that, I'm like, that's a difference in mindset, man. Like, the Chargers are sitting there trying to slit the Vikings' throat. Going for it on 4th and 1, deep in their own territory to end the game. Going for it on 4th and goal right before halftime. Like, they are trying to win. They're not trying to be safe and avoid critics and not be too risky. And they're like, F it, man. We're coming in here to win.
Yep.
Loved
I'm
it.
glad you mentioned that, because when I was at the game, I was with a guy named Jeff. He runs a big Falls Fabricating in St. Cloud. And I literally leaned over to him, and I'm like, the Chargers are looking like the Vikings of last year.
Yeah.
They were very aggressive. They were like, if we want to move the ball down the field, we'll do it whenever we want, right?
Yes.
There was a confidence level to that. And the Vikings did not look like that. It's like they lost their mojo. Like, they want to step on other people's throats last year, and we do not have that in our DNA this year.
Yeah, and that play calling and decision making, hindsight's 2020. I get that, but I promise you, if you were sitting next to me in those moments, I was saying the Vikings should be going for it here on 4th and goal. They got a new life after they didn't call it a fumble on Madison. I'm like, this needs to be a touchdown against the Chargers. Like, you're not playing the Jets here, who aren't going to score a bunch of points. You're playing the Chargers, man. You got to score.
Correct.
When the Chargers went for it on 4th and goal, I'm like, they should go for it here on 4th and goal. They did, and they scored. And they were playing to win. Last one, and then I'll toss it over to you if you had any key points on the game. Grit. The grit factor, Chargers. The Chargers won a close game that came down to the last possession of the 4th quarter without Bosa, Derwin James, Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams playing for most of or all of the period. And the Chargers won the game without those players playing. That's gritty.
That's very gritty. You also had a coach that was on his hot seat. Like, I think we talked about it before. If they lost that game, the coach is done. And I think that showed that the team rallied around that, and they put in the work to be able to get it done.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. They're a great roster. I think last year, the year before, I thought they were the best roster in football. Now, do I think they're the best this year? No, but they're still a great roster. They have a lot of great things to like, especially defensively. Offense, obviously, they have a lot of good weapons as well. But when you go into that game, we actually tied the Chargers in yardage. We both ended at exactly 475 yards, right? Now, if you were to be told that stat before the game and say, this is going to be the end, how do you predict the outcome? I think you would have thought that it would have been fairly neck and neck the entire game. And I don't feel like I felt that the entire game. I feel like we were always trying to get back into the game, right? Yeah. Although there was moments to like, I think it felt a lot more lopsided than that. And I think it shows that the Vikings have the ability to punch you in the mouth when necessary, which is probably the biggest piece that gets me the most upset. It's like we were trying to play too conservatively. I mentioned this yesterday. I feel like the end of the 2022 season happened, and Kevin O'Connell said, all right, we're no longer going to be the Rams. We're going to be the Niners, right? That's the shift that we need to make in order to take it to the next level. Yeah. And I feel like we aren't able to adequately make that work. And I can't put my finger on why not, but I feel like we're trying to far too control the game with running the ball and running heavy packages that we're not prioritizing putting points on the board. It's almost like we know that we can put points on the board, so we're like, all right, well, whatever we need to score, we will. So now we're going to control the ball, and then something kind of fell apart in that realm. When it's quick turn offense, we need to rush the ball down the field. Every time we've done it. I mean, we really have. Whenever we need to move the ball down the field and we push it, we can do it. But then when we actually try to have a good drive, things seem to fall apart. So at the end of the day, I mean, the Chargers had 7.4 yards per play offensively. We had 6.1 yards per play. That is the worst that we've had this season. We've been in the 7.5s for the first 2 weeks, and then we tried to slow it down with the run game. That did not do well. Now, yards per pass attempt, the Chargers were at 9.5 yards per pass attempt. We were at 7.3, right? Yards per rush attempt, we were at 5.4. The Chargers were at 2.0. And remember, we ended the game with the same amount of yards at 475 yards. So I think there's definitely something to be said there. And one thing to be kind of low-key alarmist about is the third down success rate. The Vikings had a 28% third down success rate, which is bad. That is not good. The Chargers ended the day at a 45% success rate, almost double. Like, that is something that needs to be discussed in the locker room at Egan this week. Yep. That is something that cannot continue. So when I think about going in to win at the Panthers and the rest of the games this year, you need to be able to throw the ball a little bit better. Like, I know establishing the run is an important piece, and maybe you and I disagree a little bit on this, but when you're going up against a premier quarterback, you need to prioritize putting points on the board versus pertaining possession.
Yes.
You need to get better on third down, which I think is a little bit of play call, a little bit of execution, and turnovers, man.
Yeah. Yep. You know, the time of possession thing is always an interesting discussion. I think it's more of a result of winning than it is a means to win. Mm-hmm. If you follow me there. I mean, it's like you know, 12 plays, 80 yards, 7.5 minutes, touchdown. It's like, that's a great looking drive on paper, and you did it. So that's great job. But like, what are the chances that you can possess the ball for 12 consecutive plays without something bad happening? Fumble, interception, sack, penalty, negative yardage play, right? So, I mean, you want to strike, man. You want to be explosive, strike, and put pressure on the other team by scoring, not by possessing the ball the whole game, right? So,
100%. Yeah. And I think if you look at the NFL as a whole, if you were to get on the wrong side of 2 turnovers in a game, that is essentially a death sentence. Like, you're not coming back from that very often. And I think the only way to do that is to put as many points on the board as you can. I'm not saying go be the Dolphins at 70 points here, but you need to go run track meet. Like, let's try to get back. And we were in that capacity. We had 2 turnovers. Well, obviously the one happened at the end of the game, but at the end of the day, you need to put points on the board if you are going to provide turnovers. And until you can fix that issue, you need to just go track meet. Unfortunately, prove me wrong as a football strategist, but I think that's the only way to get around it.
I'd rather be the Vikings offense and say, "Hey, man, let's get into some track meets and let's score some points. Let's try and score a bunch of points." Then be the Vikings defense, who's the position they're in right now, is like, "Oh my God, I guess we just got to blitz a lot to try and get pressure on the quarterback." Like, it could work, but like, that's you're leaving yourself exposed in a lot of other ways. So I'd rather be the Vikings.
Feast or famine.
Yeah. So, I guess the last thing I had here was Justin Jefferson. Like, if you just watched only him, like every snap, all you do is watch Jefferson and grade him plus minus. Like, that was a plus rep, that was a minus rep. I don't think he has a minus rep, like, ever.
Nope.
It's crazy. He's one of the best players in the NFL. Like,
period.
Like,
best non-quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, he wins every rep.
And I was really thankful that Addison started to come to his own during this game, because I think that will really start to dictate coverage here moving forward as more and more teams get tape on him, because they can't sell out to stop Justin Jefferson anymore. And obviously they couldn't even stop him now, but I think that will make him even more open the more and more Jordan Addison gets integrated. So I'm really, really excited about that. I was really, really scared when he was on the field there for a hot second when he got hurt. I think it was maybe cramping that happened there.
It was.
But I was like, oh my gosh, I bet he's regretting not signing his big deal before the season, because that would be a killer blow to
catastrophic. It'd be. I would be on the other side of the ledger. You know, I just said eyes on the prize. You can still win the division. Right now, if Jefferson, God forbid, he gets hurt, but if that did happen, I'd be like, it's over this year, boys. I mean,
pack it in.
Yeah, for so. But just it's so fun to watch him play, Jefferson. He is just so good. We're recording less than 24 hours after the game, so PFF has not come down with the grades. Is that correct? They haven't dropped them?
Correct. They're still pending on PFF.
So I don't know. We might owe the folks another episode. We're also not going to get nitty gritty previewing the Panthers here, so maybe we owe everyone another episode this week. And if our schedules allow, we can maybe record that end of the week and talk Panthers and break down some of the PFF grades. But for now, let's guess who you think graded well and who you think didn't. On offense, thumbs up, I would say Jefferson, Addison, Cousins, Oliver, Madison. Those would be my guesses on offense.
It's like you read my mind, because those are the exact players that I thought of. I think TJ Hawkinson had a really good game in some capacities, but obviously with the fumble and there was some dropped issues there in the end of the game there. I think that'll ding him quite a bit, but I think you're absolutely correct, because Madison was able to bounce back. I think he had some pretty obvious motivation with Cam Akers lying there in the wait. So I think he's recognizing his place as RB1 is maybe under question, so he really tried to show up. Now, obviously, that's a little bit of a game plan to try to go prioritize his appearance on the game field, but he had a really great game. Addison, I think he's proving that he is worth the first-round pick, and maybe this isn't even a hot take, but I think we have yet to really scratch the surface with Jordan Addison. I think we haven't really even integrated him into our offense. I think KJ Osborne was able to save his place at WR2 with his big touchdown there. If that was aside, I think you would have seen Addison get more and more integrated as the number 2 wide receiver, and that's where I'd really look to see him really start to show out.
Yep. Defensively, I got 3 players who I would give the thumbs up to as probably being in the top 5, but I went first on offense. So why don't you take a quick stab on defense? Who are you thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I would have said Danielle Hunter in a few plays, but he was, I think along the defensive line, Danielle Hunter was the only guy that even remotely mattered. So I think there's a chance he's towards the top. I don't think he necessarily graded out great because he did not get home at all in comparison to his first 2 games, but I think he's grading better than anyone else on the defensive line.
He did have the strip sack. He did have the strip sack.
You're correct. Yep, that's fair. So then that further supports my point. Danielle Hunter. I think Cam Bynum had another great game.
Yep, agreed. He's on my list.
So, he's definitely a guy that has proven once again that he bounced back from his second year and mimicked his rookie year. So really excited to see that. I think Josh Metellus had another good one, but I don't know if that's in my exact list, but I really did like him. And then Ivan Pace also showed out pretty well, in my opinion.
Okay.
I was at the game, so I couldn't watch everything. I haven't rewatched the tape yet, so if I missed anything, call it out. But I would say Ivan Pace Jr., Cam Bynum, and Danielle Hunter.
Okay. I didn't put Pace on there, but I didn't have him on my thumbs down either. So be curious to see what the data says there. I want to know what you think when you watch the game back, and then I want to know what PFF thinks.
Yeah.
I agree on Bynum. I had Hunter in there, and then I had Metellus in there, and then I put Hicks in there. I know I say this a lot about him. I say it every week. He's around the ball a lot. And is that because you're giving up receptions and coverage, or is it because you're around the ball a lot? But he also had a forced fumble and fumble recovery too. Hicks did. So I thought Hicks played well. I was a proponent of keeping him this season. I was all on board with Kendricks being out. And I'm glad they kept Hicks. And I thought he played well. I have a feeling it's the corners, thumbs down, with all the receptions they gave up and just not being able to cover. That'd be my guess.
Caleb Evans,
who basically dropped a pick. I say this to like my kids and other people I watch the game. Like those, it's like if you're playing defense and you tip a ball, you get your hands on a pass, but you don't intercept it and it's incomplete. Yeah. It's like, way to knock it down. I'm like, that. Like that's a minus play. Caleb Evans, that's a minus play. Like even if Palmer wouldn't have caught that for the touchdown, that's a minus play because he had a pick in his hands.
In his hands. And if you get it in your hands, you should catch it.
Yes,
the Chris Carter mentality.
Yes, and I get it. They're DBs, not receivers, but like that was not a high degree of difficulty catch relative to the NFL game. Everything's moving really fast. I get it, all that. But like relatively speaking, that was a low degree of difficulty interception. And it cost the Vikings huge.
It probably cost them the game if you're being completely honest, considering we lost by 4 points.
You know what? Another thing too, Gyles, and you probably noticed this watching the game live, but you'll notice it when you go back and watch it. Kellen Moore, who's the Chargers offensive coordinator, did a great job of setting up the double pass touchdown.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Because they were doing those lateral passes to receivers, those wide receiver like basically in the flat. They did those the entire first half, and the Vikings rallied, and then that set up the double pass, man. I mean, they had 2 vertical routes on that, and they were both open.
Yep, unfortunately, and that was a killer punch. Full stop.
Yeah, it was.
And I was a big fan of Kellen Moore when he was a Cowboy, and now that he's with the Chargers, I think he even has a better unit. I mean, he has a better quarterback. No disrespect to Dak Prescott, but as a football fan, I'm really excited to see what he's doing over there with the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, not wanting to be prisoner of the moment here, but it's a pretty short list who you'd take at quarterback in the league right now over Herbert. I mean, it's a short list, right?
Burrow and Mahomes, I think, are about the only ones that I would measure. And I think so. And there's even a chance, considering the play thus far this season, that I'd put Herbert above Burrow.
Yeah,
it'd be a discussion. Don't get me wrong, it's not an easy decision, but he's top 3, full stop.
Yeah, he's a good player. And he's very fluid and smooth, and it looks like it's almost like he looks like he's a varsity quarterback playing in a JV game, or like a JV quarterback playing in a 9th grade game. Like, it's just a little easier for him. Yep. It's going a little bit slower. It's the ball handling, and he never panics. The pocket movement, it's just easy. It looks easy.
Doesn't turn over the ball.
Yeah. So he's a special player, and he's the guy where, you back up the Brinks truck and you give him, and they just did. Yeah, and you pay him and you keep him for as long as he'll play for you, man.
Yeah, 100%.
We can try and get our calendars together here and preview the Panthers later in the week. But just quick thoughts on the Panthers. Adam Thielen just had a great game in Seattle. We don't know who will play quarterback for the Panthers. Bryce Young did not play yesterday. It was Andy Dalton who played. I think Young has an ankle injury that the Panthers may be taking this opportunity to sort of rest him and heal that injury at a time when maybe he wasn't quite ready to play. So the Vikings will be installed as favorites in this game. They will be 3-4 point favorites. I know it's on the road and they're 0-3, but I do expect them to go to Carolina and beat the Panthers. That's what I'm anticipating, and I just don't know that the Panthers are going to be able to slow the Vikings offense down. So I think it's a 30-point game for the offense and just not enough firepower for the Panthers against the Vikings.
I completely agree. I think the Panthers are in a position to maybe be contenders next year, but this year I think the Vikings should have it in the bag. Now, I thought that definitely against the Buccaneers, and been proven incorrect. So obviously anything can happen in the NFL because everyone's getting paid $200+ million to go win the football game. But on paper, we should win this game handily. I really do. I know there's a lot of emotion with Adam Thielen, like you mentioned. It's going to be a great revenge game. He's definitely a Ring of Honor guy when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings. But we should put up 30 points at least. I'm predicting there's a chance that this could go 30-12 if we do this right.
I mean, if they do it right, if they don't turn it over, I mean, I think the Vikings would rather see Bryce Young than Andy Dalton, to be honest with you. I don't think Bryce Young can win the game. The game wrecker in this one is Brian Burns, the defensive end for Carolina, who's really good.
Yeah.
Don't know if J.C. Horn, their really talented corner, will play. He's out with an injury. Don't know if Bryce Young will play. Panthers' offensive line is all right, but Vikings need to get in the win column this week, and the Panthers are a good opponent for them to be facing, all things considered. So.
100%. And when I look at the matchups, else, I really think we should be able to win this game when you look at the matchups across offense on our side and defense on their side, based on the people that are going to play. Obviously, you do have Xavier Woods back there at safety, who's been having a really great season, but I think we're going to be able to overcome. Yeah,
I agree. So we'll try and jot some notes down, maybe record another episode here later in the week, and talk more Vikings football. But I think for now that'll do it. Do we omit any notes you had that you wanted to get to, Gyles?
No, we'll release the PFF grades when they come out. But I think we just need to put a smile on and move forward, and just kind of have a short memory here and forget about the past and move forward to the Panthers.
All righty, sounds good. Have a good week, Gyles.
Yeah, you too.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Wobcast 2.0. We thank you for listening, and we encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to the Wobcast 2.0. You can do that wherever you find all your other favorite podcasts and football content. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, all the other places where you find all your other podcasts, you can find the Wobcast 2.0. So please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow. On behalf of Gyles, this is Wobby signing off for now. Might be back later in the week to talk Vikings Panthers. If not, we'll be back next Monday to break down the Vikings, hopefully victory over the Carolina Panthers. Until then, Skol Vikings.